Hey everyone, so the new adaptation of Scott Westerfeld's book Uglies is out on Netflix, and I'll admit I enjoyed the book. I'm a fan. I love Scott Westerfeld's work, and I was really excited when I heard that this was being adapted into a film. And I'll admit, I was also a little bit nervous. Yep, this is one of those ultra complex YA novels that fans absolutely love, and capturing its nuance and layering, it is a challenge for any film. So, how did they do with the adaptation of Uglies? So let's get into it. And don't forget to give this review a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos because there are definitely more coming. And I love having you here. Thank you so much. All right. So, Uglies. It takes place in a far off world where on their 16th birthday, kids undergo an operation that erases all of their physical flaws and transforms them from ugly to pretty and socially acceptable. Tally is the main character, and her best friend is Paris, and they are both counting down the days until they get their operations. And that's just like what every kid does. That's what you desire. That's what you look forward to. That's all you think about. It's a rite of passage to get into the upper echelons of life across the bridge and into the pretty city. However, things change once Paris gets his operation, and Tally's worldview is expanded as she learns that there is more to life as a pretty person than what she has been led to believe. And that's pretty much the setup for the film. I love Scott Westerfeld. His work, I just love it to pieces. But I really had to set that aside. Like all the stuff that I know about the novel and the series, had to set that aside for this review. So I am really struggling with how to do that. So I'm going to try to do it in a way so that people who haven't read the book can get a fair judgment of this movie. So setting all that aside, I'm going to focus on the film itself. And while the book fills in the world, the choices the characters make, the motivations that drive them, and all the things that make Tally's journey compelling, much of that depth is missing in the film, leaving a watered down version of the story, unfortunately. For those who haven't read the book, it may feel really unsatisfying. I try to be fair in my reviews, balancing positives and negatives, and I rarely encounter films that have created such negative experiences. And when I do, I generally don't waste my time on them because I have so little time to spend. But if there's something worth talking about and unpacking that's useful, that's when I'll do a review. And that's kind of why I'm doing this review. So let's talk about Uglies and why this movie is an example of why and how so many films in Hollywood are failing today. This adaptation loosely explores themes of power, beauty, and conformity, using beauty as a social currency in place of money. While Scott Westerfeld's novel created a compelling and complex world that really fleshed out these ideas, the film glosses over the bigger questions, creating a shallow and uneven story. Worse, it fails to explain the core foundation of the world and why its society needs to brainwash children, why pretties need to be docile, or how this world operates. None of it makes sense on screen. But before I get ahead of myself, there are some things in the movie that actually do work. Overall, Tally's character is fairly well developed, showing her as a likable, smart, resourceful person. She's a bit of a rule breaker, but one who also wants to conform and fit into society. And that character comes off really well on screen. You really do get that part of her. The dynamic between Tally and Shay is done really well. Shay is a friend that she meets along the way, making her friendship feel stronger with Shay than her friendship with Paris, who's been her friend like her entire life. Despite only knowing each other for a couple of weeks, that relationship with Shay really defines much of who Tally is in the film. The idea that children get to design their adult physical appearance, which is made possible through this mysterious body transforming operation, is actually a really interesting concept. And they get into that a bit in the film, which is really neat. And I do like that. It's very empowering in a way to be able to design your body, but it's also really disturbing. And they only kind of get into that. Like they are giving people the ability to externalize their inner self. And that's something that is very philosophical in nature. And that's always a topic that I'm interested in is like, how do you externalize your inner person and bring it out? So that I found interesting. Not always the way they pulled it off, but I found that concept interesting. Those are some of the heavy themes and powerful topics, but Uglies as a film, it really doesn't drive them home. Instead, here's where the movie falls apart and how it fails. There's so much more. So, there are too many safe choices. The film never defines beauty, nor does it get into external transformation that is more than skin deep. They can change everything about their body, but they never really get into changing races or genders or anything like that. They don't even touch on if those things are even meaningful in this future society that really seems to have the ability to redesign every aspect of the human body. So you don't get the meaningful conversation with that body transformation that the whole film is about. The ethics of the story are really thin. There's only one point at the end when ethics of choice are even brought up, and the logic behind the consent to turn a pretty into an ugly is weak at best because the film made the ethics of the operation almost invisible, other than the fact that there's this inhibitor that they add to the person's brain to make them more compliant. And so once a person becomes a pretty, do they really have the ability to give consent? There's so much they could talk about here that they actually just kind of gloss over. So the next thing, why doesn't Tally know anyone in this world, like literally other than Paris? The film shows Tally and Paris as best friends, but when she meets Shay and her friends, who are the same age and in the same class and in the same school. It's as if they've never crossed paths, which just feels unrealistic if she and Paris have been there all this time and they haven't been living in complete isolation with just the two of them. Of course, they didn't. And so they must have known other people, but that doesn't come off in this film at all. So the fact that they did this makes Shay feel like she's kind of a shortcut for explaining the world to Tally, which she doesn't really need to have done, and by extension, explaining the world to us, the audience. Also, the world building is very tiny. You only see the school, the city, and the wilderness that leads to the smoke. That's the name of the camp. That's all you see. And you don't really understand, like, is this the last city on the planet? Are there other societies out there? Are there people anywhere else? What happened to the rest of the world? The film doesn't bother to answer any of that. And it makes the story feel small and shallow, and it should have addressed those things. There are logical gaps literally everywhere. The operation doesn't just change your looks. It also implants a lesion in your brain, like I mentioned previously, that makes you forget your past and turns you into this shallow, happy party goer who is pretty. The city also looks perfect, but there's no explanation for how it functions. Who's running this society? Who's doing all the work? Who's doing the farming and the building and the maintaining of the city? It's all ignored. Now, they don't have to get into it deeply, but they should touch on these things in this film. This is their one shot to get to the audience and lay out this world, and they don't touch it at all. The technology is barely addressed, other than this machine that does the operation. The social structures are absolutely ignored. The romance in the film, it just feels forced. Tally's connection with David, who's the leader of the rebels, it just lacks chemistry and depth, making her life-changing decision for him feel very unconvincing after such a brief time of being with the rebels. So the movie ends with Tally basically sacrificing herself to become pretty, which honestly doesn't feel like that much of a sacrifice since she spent the whole movie wanting to have this operation until the very end when she decides to stay with David and the people of the smoke. So by sacrificing herself in this way, um, she convinces David and his people to trust her again after she betrayed them. This gives her the ability to consent to having the pretty operation reversed by David's people in the next movie, because it does set up a next movie. And I have to say, that is technically fine as a cliffhanger, but it doesn't make us care. Honestly, I found getting to the end of this film, I didn't care about Tally. I didn't care about David or the smoke. I didn't care about the pretties. I didn't care about the uglies. I didn't care about anyone because they never took the time to dig into anyone or anything or set any of this up. By the time the credits roll, I swear, you're left wondering, what was the point of all this? Why did they waste the money on this movie? And why did they destroy Scott Westerfeld's book? Anyway, Hollywood needs to take a look at films like Uglies to see how the adaptation process goes wrong. Translating these really deeply complex books into a simplistic film that doesn't establish the basic function of the world to connect the dots within the story is not sustainable production process. And it will ultimately bury studios in debt because they won't be seen by audiences and they won't pay for themselves. You can't just adapt a novel by hitting the high points in that story because people who read the novel, they might be able to stay with the story and kind of fill in those blanks. But people who haven't read the book, they're gonna notice it. And even the people that did read the book, they're gonna feel the thinness of the story. And that's just my take. I know there are a lot of people who actually watched this film, but I haven't heard anyone really talking about it, which makes me think there just was a lot of apathy for it. And if there's anything that kills a film more quickly than apathy, I don't know what it is. An apathetic response is like the kiss of death to a movie. As a result, the film, it just plays it safe. It avoids risks. It skips over the deeper themes and doesn't take the time to build a believable world. As a standalone movie, it's bland. As an adaptation, it's disappointing. I can't, in good conscience, recommend Uglies to anyone. Even if you read the book, I can't. Time is precious. And this is nearly 2 hours that you will never get back. So, Uglies, did you watch it? Did it work for you? I genuinely would love to hear. And if you liked it, I would love to know why. And I would love to know what parts of it that you liked. All right, everybody, that's it for now. Definitely drop some notes in the comments. Would love to see you there. And don't forget to like this review and subscribe for more. Thanks so much, everybody. I look forward to seeing you soon. I've got a bunch more movie reviews coming out. So stay tuned. And in the meantime, why not check out these reviews? All right. Thanks so much. Talk to you later. Bye.